Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special meeting of the Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Thank you, Chairman Pryor, for calling the meeting. Before we get started, I do want to thank the Chancellor and the University Police and the University Facility team across the university for a fantastic graduation celebration on Saturday. I actually thought the nighttime event was really spectacular and the right call. I think my guess is it was a third again more people there for Saturday than last year's, which was on Mother's Day morning. So good job. As chair of this committee, I must remind all members of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest. If you know of any conflict or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter coming before the committee today, please identify it at this time. Anybody have a conflict? Hearing none, I'll ask Chris McClure to please call the roll.
Chair Bullock,
Present.
Vice Chair Codis.
Here.
Mr. Blaine.
Here.
Mr. Briner.
Here.
Dr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Meekins. Mr. Patel.
Here.
Mr. Pryor.
Here.
Mr. Turner.
Here.
Mrs. White.
She's here.
Here, I'm here, sorry, here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The agenda for this special meeting was provided to board members via on board. We also frankly talked about it at the last meeting that we would have this meeting to consider the budget. Links to a copy of the agenda for this special meeting were also posted electronically on the board's website and the university's open meetings calendar. I'll ask every board member to please refer to their agenda now. There's only one item on that agenda, and that is to review and approve the university's all funds budget. The board has asked Vice Chancellor Knuffman, our CFO, to be present today and to present this item. Vice Chancellor Knuffman.
Thank you, Chair Bullock. Good morning, everyone. I have a brief set of slides to walk through today, but first I just want to thank everyone for the continued engagement. We've had some really good discussions and engagement on several issues since the last board meeting. And again, this is a follow-up to the March BOT meeting where we talked about having a special meeting to approve the budget or review the budget prior to the Board of Governors reviewing next week. Next slide. So here, I can take that, sure. Thanks. Here you can see the development schedule, and I'll just skip right to the end, which is where we're at in this process, and it's hard to see, but you can see, again, we're at that stage where we are seeking approval prior to the Board of Governor review next week. And I thought it would be useful to just revisit, again, what does the system office ask of the boards of trustees to keep in mind as you're reviewing and thinking about the budget? And I think these are really helpful guidelines to think about. First, does this budget promote affordability? This is the 8th year of tuition for undergraduate North Carolinians remaining flat. That's incredible. There is a 3% statutory cap on fees, and in our budget, we're not increasing fees, but just a very slight amount for student union fees. So again, under 1% on fees. And again, almost everything at the institution's aimed at cost and access. And really, that's why you continue to see UNC-Chapel fill as one of the best values in higher education repeatedly. Second question, are there strategic investments to achieve the university goals? When we look at this last slide, I've got 4 here, substantive ones. The last one, it kind of outlines all the investments this budget makes, but that's the entire purpose of the budget. We don't have unlimited resources, and we need to have a process that guides us to make sure that we're using those dollars with our top priorities. Does the budget reflect efficiency efforts? This budget identifies $4.5 million worth of savings, $2.5 million from lease savings. Again, we've continued to try to better utilize our footprint and really be thoughtful about where we need leases and additional space versus relying on space we already own. $1.5 million of savings within the IT budget to self-finance their own investments in cyber. And then third area being a $500,000 of savings due to restructuring and reorganizations within UNC-Chapel Hill. So we have been responsive. We have identified some efficiency efforts. We continue to work on that area. Our funding pressures being addressed. I think this budget is responsive to those pressures. Some of the biggest pressures we face as an institution are on the enrollment side, where enrollment really puts pressure on individual schools. There's a need for investments in faculty and staff to keep pace. This budget actually changes and we've talked a little bit about that allocation model, but we now have a model in place where dollars are going to flow with certainty and follow where those enrollments are happening. So I think it is responsive in many ways. The other area is just being, pressure to remain competitive. Our excellence. Can we attract the right faculty? Do we have startup funds to really be able to attract the right faculty? We tried to identify some resources in a reserve to be responsive to that piece, as well as just starting new programs. Again, pressure. Can we continue to meet what the state needs from us? Can we identify and invest in new programs? And then lastly, the change in fund balance is a strategic. It's intentional. There's strategy behind what's happening in changes in fund balance. And when you look through, it's most noteworthy when you can look in the budget tables and you'll see the auxiliary units. Those are those units that are relying on are self-supporting. So they have fees, whether it be housing, dining, parking, athletics, those areas where you can see a beginning fund balance in the template and then an ending fund balance. And you'll see generally, for most of those, you'll see them spending into the fund balance or reducing that fund balance. That is strategic. It's been built back up post-COVID. And now there's investments back in the deferred maintenance, which have been put off for some time. So a couple of areas were, I think, primary areas of Board of Trustee engagement and follow-up since our March meeting. And those really are DEI and athletics. And I might note these are also big areas of focus in higher ed nationally. So on DEI, since we last met in March, the Board of Governors Governance Committee approved policy changes on this topic. The full Board of Governors still needs to approve these changes at the May Board of Governors meeting next week. And in addition to that, we do expect the system office to be providing additional implementation guidance. And we've talked about this a little bit before. There are significant definitional issues related to defining DEI, and our hope is this guidance will help us with that implementation. That's on DEI. On athletics, I think it's worth noting, and again, we've appreciated a lot of the feedback on these topics. The entire college athletics industry is going through an unprecedented period of significant change. And there are systemic financial issues with the current model, and certainly UNC-Chapel Hill is not immune. And so while in this budget, the revenue and fund balance is sufficient to cover planned expenses in 25, there are increasing pressures and important financial variables that will come into focus in the near future. And so we've very much appreciated your feedback and counsel on these issues, and we will continue to rely on this body for strategic advice as the university navigates what is a evolving landscape. So those are those two main areas. And then as last slide, I really just wanted to, again, highlight some of the great investments this budget makes. You see the priorities that I referenced earlier at the top of those columns, the 4 columns addressing state priorities, Carolina's excellence, safety and accessibility, and then solidifying our investments. First, the School of Data Science and Society and the School for Civic Life and Leadership, two new schools, certainly state priorities, certainly a component of what makes Carolina excellent. And then also we've already started investments there, and this budget ensures and solidifies those. We talked a little bit about the tuition and appropriation allocation model, again, responsive to many of those priorities. And again, I think it's going to provide some certainty, some better financial planning for individual academics units on campus. The startup, whether it's startup or also investments for new academic programs. So again, being able to launch a new academic program and having some funds set aside to be able to invest in those. Research and equipment and support. Again, we talked a little bit with the pressures there where individual units, the cost of an investment may exceed what they could realistically have on hand. And so we wanted to have some funds that would be able to cut across the institution. And lastly, I think worth noting just a couple of different investments in security and safety. That was clearly a priority in this budget. And with that, happy to take any questions.
So thank you, Vice Chancellor Knopman. Let me start by, I want to say a couple of things. I want to ask the Chancellor if he has any things that he would like to add. Chancellor Roberts, in just a second, I wanted to first highlight, and I want to bring the board up to speed on something that Chair Pryor and I experienced when we first landed on the Board of Trustees and went to that orientation session. I believe it was in Hill Hall, when we were told by the then provost that this university was operational under 16 separate budgets. Not one all funds budget, but 16 separate budgets that sat on the provost's desk. At that time, Chair Pryor and I looked at each other and said, this has got to change. And in now a little over 4 years, we're on our third all funds budget. Is that correct, Vice Chancellor Knopman? And, I think it's a real testament to leadership from a board of trustees to push this down the road, because without the leadership of the board, I don't believe it would have happened, quite frankly. And I think it gives the chancellor, the executive team, and every department head across the university a real advantage to have a forward-looking budget. They know what they're dealing with. They know the funds available. They understand the strategic investment, and they understand the direction for the next year. It gives them solid guidance. I think this board should really be proud of the work we've done and the work that Vice Chancellor Knopman has done to provide this all funds budget. And then our model is the model that stands for the rest of the university system. Chair Pryor.
If I could just interject, Mr. Chairman, it's really you, Chairman Bolick. I remember that meeting, and it was you that said, this cannot last. We have to change this. And it was then Vice Chancellor Pruitt, who you put the question to, and you said, is this right? There are actually 16 different budgets. And Dave said to me, we're going to change this.
And we did.
So thank you, Dave.
And well, I appreciate that, but Vice Chancellor Knopman, your team really did you guys really got it done. And we've been lauded by the S&P and by our rating agencies for doing it. I mean, it's well done. And we wouldn't have these charts that you're able to show us without the all funds budget. I mean, you'd be picking out of thin air. I also want to point out the DEI discussion. We did have this discussion at the last meeting. I think it's instructive that the committee, the Board of Governors Committee, unanimously approved changing the strategic direction of DEI and replacing DEI initiatives with an overall policy that looks toward equality and a meritocracy. I have stated before, and I'll state again, I think that DEI is divisive. I don't think that it's productive. I don't think it gives a return on investment to taxpayers and to the institution itself. I'm gonna make a proposal afterward. I do want to hear from the chancellor first on that, though. And 3 athletics, and you highlighted those, and those have been the 2 areas of discussion on this committee and amongst board members. Athletics, the landscape has changed so much. I recall a meeting in this room a month after the Final Four in New Orleans, when we began the discussion of the future of athletics at UNC-Chapel Hill. Since then, there has been, tectonic shifts in the way athletics is funded. And from the look of our budget, it's not getting any better in terms of funding and our ability to fund and compete at the highest level with the current amount of resources that our athletic department generates, with the amount of money that we receive or do not receive from the ACC, and the current handcuffs that are placed on us by the NCAA moving forward. I mean, we're going to have to make some changes, and we're going to have to be a leader in this effort. And because, if you look at that budget, And the way it stands right now, just on the athletic, it doesn't look good. I mean, it just doesn't look good for us to be able to continue that year after year and remain competitive like our alumni and like our fans and like the supporters of the university expect us to be. They expect us to be competitive at the highest level. And I don't believe this budget has a long-term viability in terms of athletics to maintain that level of success. So we're going to have to take a hard look at that. With that being said, I do want to ask Chancellor Roberts, great remarks, by the way, on Saturday. Thank you, sir. It was really good to hear you and wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in here on the committee level.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining the special meeting. I would echo your praise for Nate and the finance team. I can't really take any credit. I will say that I was on the Board of Governors when the all funds budget policy was passed and felt strongly that it was an important tool for management, both at the campus and at the system level. And as I think most of you know, there was a lot of pushback from schools across the system with respect to the deadline. A lot of campuses saying that the deadline was unrealistic, that they couldn't possibly produce an all funds budget in the time allotted. And then Chapel Hill delivered its all funds budget first among all system schools. It sent a very powerful signal, I think, to the rest of the system for the largest and most complex budget. The school that had the most work to do to produce an all funds budget, to deliver the all funds budget first among system schools. Again, a very strong testament to the capability and competence of Nate and his impressive team. So I just want to echo the congratulations on that. This budget development work, as Nate indicated, started before I started as interim chancellor. It's the product of significant contributions across the enterprise. It's a robust process, and I think a good budget. As I say, I came into the process midway through. I look forward to being involved from the very beginning of the process as we enter the next cycle. But I think a good budget that makes investments in important areas, most notably campus safety. We've had the discussion about DEI and obviously await system, the final policy from the system and the implementation guidance there. And of course, a time of significant change in college athletics, not just at Carolina, but across Division I, with every school wrestling with its revenue model and its overall spending profile, with a number of changes to come that will affect us externally, including the likely settlement of pending NIL litigation. So budgeting in those circumstances for athletics in particular is more art than science, but we have one of the most experienced athletic directors in the country with a strong national reputation. And obviously we need to try to continue to budget in a atmosphere of greater uncertainty than anybody who has spent their careers in college athletics can remember. So we need to continue to move forward under those conditions. Again, thank you to Nate and his team.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say? We'll start with the room first. Trustee Cotis.
Yeah. I remember joining the Board of Governors in 2013 and was surprised that there wasn't a comparative budget for the various schools, and had to go actually to the auditor's office to get paper copies of documents and then have my staff retype those to get a comparison back then. And we produced it. And it shows how important it is that someone's looking over those numbers and able to compare them, because you can start looking at cost drivers and various metrics. But the information wasn't really available because no one had asked for it. It wasn't there wasn't funding tied to it. No one's asked for it. So it's important to have people asking the tough questions. I think Carolina has shown over the years that it asks the tough questions, it gets the information, and it leads to better decision making. Our power here, one power we have is the power of the purse. People may say we're an advisory board, but at the end of the day, we do have to decide on the budget. And I think in this vein, there are a few different items that I would like to see us tackle. Chair Bullock has been a leader on talking about the issues of DEI, and I don't know if you were going to go further into that topic now, or if
I
you
will. I'll go
Okay.
further. Yeah.
then I'll reserve my comments until after your additional comments on these.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Briner.
Sure. First of all, incredible work in getting to where we are, but I'm the kind of guy who's always, what can we do better next time? And so two things that I'd suggest as we think about setting the standard and leading the way even further in the future. First is forecast to actual analysis. And we've got to look back and see on a division level how we're forecasting and whether we're missing in material ways that we can learn from. And then second, to the extent that forecasts are negative, and we've got a couple of those, what's the out-year plan? It could be just catching up on deferred maintenance, and I understand that makes sense, but we should have that discussion. So as we think about taking this even further to the next level, those are the two areas that I think we should focus on going forward. But obvious, I missed the Stone Age, and we're now in the modern age, and I just want to take us.
Trustee Evans.
I'm fine.
Okay, great. Anybody on the Zoom want to say anything? Add anything? Trustee
Bullock, this is Vinay. Quickly, I see that the two topics that were kind of singled out were DEI and athletics. And I know you're going to talk a little bit more about that. Does it make sense for us, from an audit perspective, to take a deeper dive into, and it's something that we can talk about next week when we meet, whether it's funding issues that are going to come up in the future, current modeling that we're doing on the athletic side. I agree with you 100%. The expectation is enormous from an alumni side, and we need to make sure that we're doing right by what we have, and then moving forward, what are we going to need? So it might be something that we have a discussion on in our committee meetings next week.
So Trustee Patel, you are chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee.
Yes, sir.
Are you making a suggestion that we take a look at auditing the athletic department?
Yes. If we're going to single out two things that are critical to our budget in this thing, I think it's worth taking a deeper dive into it, and we can discuss it as a committee. And then if that's what a committee feels, then we'll make a recommendation on Wednesday.
Okay, great.
Great idea.
Thank you, Trustee Patel. Anybody else have any comments on this?
I have just one.
Trustee White?
This is Ramsey. Hi. To tag on to everything that we've just talked about, I agree. And Nate, thank you. I think that, clearly all businesses are dynamic, and UNC is no exception. And clearly we need contingencies in our budget. And I think you've been a good steward to plan for these contingencies. I guess my question would be, with everything we've discussed, I want to confirm that these contingencies are at the discretion of this board going forward. And I think that, what Vinay suggested, and Brad, everyone, I think that will help with that. But is that fair to say?
I think so. You want to add anything to that?
Well, I just say when thinking about contingency, I appreciate that question. A big impetus for having an all funds budget was to be more intentional about having some reserve and ability to handle the unexpected. I do think we have built up some of that ability over time, and it's really proven very valuable even this year in how we're managing the budget. And I do think that's always an engagement with this body as we think about, dipping into that or using that strategically at different times. That's always an engagement with this body. So I do think that's a fair comment.
Since you're on there, we did have a system study on the amount of money that state funds are being spent on DEI. Is that correct?
We did.
What's the total number, generally speaking, on that?
So the UNC, the report we provided to the system office, the most recent one, again, that's one way to define DEI spend, and it identified $2.3 million total in spending.
Our campus?
Our campus, UNC-Chapel Hill.
Thank you. Anybody else?
And just, sorry, one more comment. I know we were talking about too, just with with spending in the deficit on fund balance, you being strategic, and I get that. But I would say, is it increasing revenue in the future, or is it filling a spending shortfall? And I think, again, an audit, whatever unit you want, I think athletics is smart, can help us look at that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Trustee White. So I'm going to move at some point on the all funds budget that we peel out $2.3 million in state funds that's directed toward DEI efforts and reallocate that to public safety at the university. I think we have an opportunity to lead on this. We have an opportunity to be out front on this. With the Board of Governors pending policy change, I think we'll be in the clear to do that. And if something happens, we can certainly, the Chancellor has management flexibility to pivot if he needs to. But I'm going to make a motion that we peel out the 2.3 million in state and trust fund money used for DEI, and that we reallocate that to public safety. Did you want to say something, Mr. Vice Chair, on that?
Sure. Yeah. I completely agree. I think that a management flex approach that allows reallocation of funds is appropriate. We just spent $30 million on the SFFA suit. We've got a board resolution for non-discrimination that I think there are lots of different programs that don't comply with that. And again, while we may be an advisory board, we do have the power of the purse. And if we don't want to approve programs that aren't in compliance with our resolution, then we don't have to approve those programs. I think that DEI in a lot of people's minds is divisiveness, exclusion, and indoctrination. We need more unity and togetherness, more dialogue, more diversity of thought, and a management flex cut that ensures compliance with SFFA and non-discrimination and eliminates programs that are discriminatory or divisive, I think is appropriate. Also, regarding safety, I was out here Saturday walking around. I didn't go to the commencement ceremonies. I was making sure the rest of the campus was safe and walking around with Fred Sellers from UNC System. When you have warring groups or divided groups, they can hurt each other. They can damage property like they did here in the South Building with, red paint everywhere. Stickers everywhere, things torn up. Law enforcement is then forced to react to that. And they do not have all the tools they need right now to keep this campus safe from a larger threat. And it's not this particular group that's out there, it's any large group that would be gathering on campus, as we've seen riots happen around the world. So it's important to consider the needs of all 30,000 students, not just the 100 or so that may want to disrupt the university's operations. It takes away resources from others. There's a real cost when you've got 20 people out there cleaning up this paint and you've got damage to property out there as well. One law enforcement officer had someone mention where their wife worked by someone out there, which I think is, that's an attempt to intimidate, which really bothers me. And when the university has to shut down and folks in this office can't come in, that's a real problem. I think one of the approaches also, in addition to Chair Bullock's recommendations, would be to reallocate or relocate some of the activist centers and also require them to fund themselves. GoFundMe is a great source. As we've seen, you can raise $600,000 for people in a
Right.
matter of days if they're passionate about the project. And the folks that have passion projects should raise those funds themselves. I think that giving students more of a say in discretionary fee allocations or make it optional is another way to do that. And I'll just make one last comment. You know, we talk about peaceful protest, but when you destroy property or you take down the US flag, and you have to put up gates around it that cost money or deploy officers to do that. North Carolinians are watching all of this and they are not happy. And I think it's imperative that we have the proper resources for our law enforcement to protect the campus. And that means our property and that means our flag as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mr. Vice Chair of this committee. You know, it is a shame that the town of Chapel Hill refuses to aid our local university police when called upon.
On
mean,
multiple occasions.
Multiple occasions, and also that our governor's office refuses to aid our university police in the maintaining of order on our campus. That in and of itself is a shame. I think the $2.3 million would be an added help to our, you know, what is probably a budget issue with respect to how much we're having to spend on law enforcement right now.
Yeah, there's recurring costs for things like mobile security forces, a live response center, deputy chief, et cetera, that need to be funded. Now, I will say, in walking around talking to folks and in our different meetings, you know, we do need to address things like for staff members that are not paid well or on the lower end of the spectrum, including adjuncts or facilities workers or housekeepers. We need to really think about parking. I know you're going to be presenting that this week, so I won't delve into that too much. And I do think it'd be important this week for us to explain the whole divestment and fund balance concept, because I don't think a lot of people understand how that works and why, you know, why it doesn't necessarily make sense.
It's a good point. So we've heard a lot of discussion about the DI stuff. I brought that up. Athletics. I mean, is athletics something that we need to take a deeper dive on? I mean, we've
Yes.
heard from Chair Patel of the Audit Committee, Chair Pryor.
Yeah, do we want to act on this motion or do this in one motion? Because
I
I
like to
think
do
it
it
is
in one
imperative
motion. Let's
that we
do it.
carve athletics out of the approval today. And we have an extended discussion in closed session at our meeting on Thursday so that we can all hear just how bad it is and what needs to be done to remedy it. And I think that's best accomplished Thursday in closed session.
Mr. Chair, could I make a parliamentary point? It's my understanding the budget's a up or down vote and not line item amendments. So my recommendation would be if you're going to do any motions, that they be advisory in nature to the budget itself so that the budget can be voted up and down. I do believe that's what the system expects. But that may be a distinction without a difference. But
Well,
I don't
I was
read it
on the
that way.
BOG when we
I don't read
passed
it that
this.
way.
And
Okay.
the idea was that no budget would get to the BOG unless it was approved by the trustees.
Right.
I don't
my
believe-
understanding, it's an up or down vote, but this is just advice.
I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay.
I believe that this board has been empowered with the ability to approve a budget so that because we're appointed by Board of Governors members and by the North Carolina Legislature to take a deep dive look at the finances of this university. And I have all the confidence in the world in Mr. Knuffman's team and in the entire executive team at UNC-Chapel Hill and in this board. We actually spend a lot of time looking at this. And every board member has put a lot of work into this, questioned it, looked at it up and down. You know, I view this as we'll give the Board of Governors what we feel is the appropriate approval. That's my view. I don't know what you think, Chair Pryor.
That's my understanding as well, but
You got a hand. Trustee Blaine.
I'd like to make a couple of points as we think about this. The first is for some pretty explainable reasons, we are the only school in the system that is yet to get a all funds budget to the Board of Governors. The second is, my understanding is we have this early meeting today because we have to get the all funds budget to the Board of Governors by Wednesday in order for it to be considered. So while I understand the concern about athletics, and it's not one that I believe will be solved in the next 2 days, and I think that Chair Pryor's recommendation as it relates to a deep dive on it is excellent. I think if we want our voice to be heard as it relates to this year's budget and the things that Marty and Dave have been working on, that it would be advisable to move the entire budget forward as a collective package today, if possible.
I think we're envisioning a management flex cut. That's not done specifically here. We're not saying a certain line item right now. We're authorizing the chancellor, or we're directing the chancellor and vice chancellor.
Trustee Cotis, I support your theory on that. What I'm talking about is whether or not you can basically cleave the athletics budget out of the rest of the budget and then send it to the Board of Governors, and whether or not that would be considered complying with our responsibility to submit an all funds budget if we have a chunk that's that big that's not included in it. And I totally agree with Chair Pryor's point on the athletics budget, and I think that deep dive needs to take place. But again, this is a long-term issue in my mind, and we're not going to solve the structural problems with the athletic budget the next 2 days.
Jim, I think the understanding from earlier was that audit committee would take a deep dive on athletics. I don't want to speak for Chair Bullock on that, or
I think
Chair
that's,
Pryor.
that would go to Chair Patel of the audit committee. Your intention is to present that to your committee for a deep dive, a full audit of the athletic department. Is that correct? Chair Patel, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yep. That is my intention, to have that discussion on Wednesday and then come up with a recommendation to do so by Dean Weber and his group.
Trustee White, you had a comment?
Yeah, I would just say that I think what we're talking about here is actually a reason that we need line items, and there's a lot of what people understand that what we're supposed to do. I mean, are we saying, but Jim, are you saying that not carving out athletics, if that's not a possibility, then we vote, if we believe that we should carve out athletics and we cannot, then we should vote the budget down?
I'm saying that we should vote the budget through. I don't see how we can do a full-scale audit of the athletics department in time to impact this year's budget, which is already 60 days overdue, and that we have gotten some grace from the Board of Governors in terms of extended time period to deal with some of the issues we've dealt with and the transition. What I'm saying is I think we should adopt Marty's flex cut and amendment. I think that's perfectly in line, but what I'm saying we should not do is cut the athletics budget out of the approval, so that effectively we don't have an athletics budget that we're recommending to the Board of Governors for next year, when they have to act on the budgets of every school in the entire system at their next meeting. So I'm saying we should move that forward. I support Vinay's group taking a look and doing an audit of the athletic department. That's fine with me, but I don't think that can be my point is that these long-term items cannot be accomplished in the time frame before us, where that we have before us to get our budget to the Board of Governors so that it can be approved and submitted to the legislature so that they can approve a short session budget adjustment for the entire state that would incorporate our thoughts into it. I'm concerned that if we don't speak now and send this budget forward, we're going to lose our opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Trustee Blaine. I mean, my view is that we can approve the budget with a flex cut of the 2.3 million in DEI, and then some adjustment or some management flex with respect to discussions that occur on athletics at our meeting, which is in 2 days. What do you think, Chair Pryor?
Yeah, I think, you know, I have tried to get more information from athletics and have had a couple of meetings with the athletic director. And candidly, I end up with more concern and more questions having done that. In good conscience, I can't approve the budget that includes athletics in it. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to vote no if that is what we have to do today. And I really don't see why we can't have an extended discussion on this, because I think it is imperative for the board to hear all of this in closed session. I don't think people understand the issue. I don't think they understand the level of bad data that has been provided. And I think it is incumbent on us to get it right, not just to get it done in a hurry because there's a deadline. Every single time we've had a deadline and there was a compelling reason that the deadline needed to move, the deadline has in fact been moved so that we could get the right end product. And I think that's what we should do here today. I think we need a full conversation on this Thursday in closed session. And I would suggest we either delay approval of the budget until Thursday, or we get confirmation that we can carve athletics out of it so that we can have that discussion on Thursday.
Let me ask
maybe,
Mr. McClure, what is your understanding of the deadline?
My understanding was we were given till today because they have to publish all their materials a week ahead of time, which their meeting is next Wednesday.
Okay.
So they need all the materials by Wednesday. That's the reason they wanted it today, so they could get everything ready.
So borrowing from Charles's comments earlier, could we, on athletics, could we effectively footnote that, give us time to do the audit per Trustee White's comments, get more line item detail, Trustee Patel doing the deeper dive on audit of that, and per Trustee Briner's comments, look at actuals as well. So we send a budget forward with a management flex of the 2.3 and then a footnote about athletics. And then we have more time to really dig into it, because in the next couple of days, I don't think we're going to get enough detail to make substantive changes, but you may know more than me on that too, in terms of what info's available.
Vice Chancellor.
I just want
Hold on.
to add on to what Marty noted. I do want to note the budget is a point in time. It's a spending plan. It's a statement of priorities. It's not the end of conversation around resource allocation. So even there are significant variables in athletics that will come into greater focus in the coming days, weeks. And I think, you know, they're likely going to intersect with our strategy, and that conversation is going to continue. And how we allocate resources and how we manage the plan is going to be dynamic. So we're going to continue to have these conversations. I just think it's worth noting what you're approving right now isn't the end of the conversation on athletics. And I just want to note that, or what you're taking up. I don't want to say you're going to approve it, but what you're reviewing and what we're asking you to approve isn't the end of that conversation.
I would agree with that, except only to say that it is also our not only advisory, but our policymaking ability to stamp what we think is going right and what we think is going wrong. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's tantamount to approving something that we know is not the way that it should be, and we don't have accurate data to determine where we really are and how deep the hole is.
Trustee Evans.
It's a $4.5 billion budget and athletics is 125 top line. This board wants to approve the budget. We want to let the budget go forward to the Board of Governors. But I will say this, and Nate, you probably remember in November in closed session, when we were talking about the athletics budget, I was very engaged and I was really excited and happy to hear that you were working with the team of the athletics director to put forth projections. And that was in November. And we were told then that we would be able to talk about it in January. And it did not happen in January. It was no fault of your team, but it wasn't ready in January. And then we were going to talk about it in March, but the athletics director wasn't present in March. Granted, he was at a basketball game where we were competing, but he wasn't present. And now we have an opportunity to talk this Wednesday, Thursday, a couple of days from now. And we deserve the right to ask questions. We've never had it as a board. And so, come on, guys, we can approve this budget, a $4.5 billion budget. And all the time we carve something out and say, as though it's not on the consent agenda. We're going to look at it more carefully. But if we're not given the opportunity as a board to interact on something that we've been talking about since November, that's a problem. And I will vote no, but I don't want to hold this budget hostage. I want to send it along to the Board of Governors. Substantially, the whole budget that the Board of Governors will be interested in will be available to them. And we can follow up with the athletics stuff. I'm not approving the athletics budget. So, but I don't want to hold anybody hostage.
Okay. Trustee White, you have your hand up and then we're going to move along unless anybody's got anything else to say. What do you have? Trustee?
Yeah, I also just agree with everything that's been said. I think this is simple. We need more information and all some other and so we just need more information that we don't have. And it's not our problem to solve until we get more information. And then I would just say we need to uncouple this from the audit discussion. I think that to Nate's point, what we're approving is the plan for the next year. And we need more information to make sure that it intersects with the strategy.
Trustee Patel, did you have something you wanted to
Yeah, I
add?
mean, I was just saying, kind of going back to Ramsey, you're saying uncoupling it. Is there a way to move it forward contingent on the findings of the audit? Because I'm not sure. I've just sent a note to Dean how long that process will take. And if this is going to hold back approval from the Board of Governors, then I mean, we need to make sure that whatever we're sending is going to be something that they're looking for and not come back and bite us later.
Okay. So I'll move that we, at this point, approve an all funds budget with a management flex removal of $2.3 million that has been identified by the system office as expenditures from state taxpayer funds and trust funds to DEI efforts, that be management flex to have that removed and reapportioned to public safety on the university campus, and that we uncouple the athletics budget, which is approximately $124 million, so that the entire board can have a better opportunity to hear from the administration on the particulars of the athletic budget, financing, strategic revenue, and strategic cost cutting because of the current imbalance in that budget. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah. Do we have confirmation that that is how this is going to be perceived and taken based on your concern?
If you decouple it,
Yeah. I mean, is someone going to come back and say, oh, sorry, you couldn't have done that?
very possibly. I mean, we had conversations
Okay.
last year about whether this is an up or down vote. My understanding is it was. This is a new process, all right? I don't think any campus has ever tried to line item. I don't think that's what the Board of Governors is looking for, but I can't say that I did not call them before I came in here. I think no matter what happens, I'm comfortable. This goes up to the system, it goes up to the BOG, and anything will get resolved there.
Okay,
So I
move
wouldn't-
to recess for 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
I have a second from Vice Chair Codas. All those on the committee who are in favor of a 10-minute recess, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. Session on the Committee on Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure of the Board of Trustees of UNC-Chapel Hill. We're dealing with the approval of the all funds budget of the university. I'm going to withdraw my motion that I made earlier and restate the motion for approval. And that is, I move to approve the all funds budget with a carve out of $2.3 million that's currently allocated from state and trust fund money to DEI, and give the Chancellor management flex to reapportion those dollars, and to carve out of our approval the athletics budget of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with the notation that we will dive into a deeper view of this is not part of the motion, just a notation and aside. It will dive into a deeper discussion of the athletics budget, but as part of the motion, that the overall number, so that there's certainty with the Board of Governors as we send this budget on, that amount of money will not exceed the $125 million that is currently allocated. That should give the Board of Governors certainty on our overall funding. And as an aside, so that it's not like we're going to come back and ask for an additional 150, that's not our intent. So that's my motion. Do I have a second for that?
Can
And what-
somebody reread that to me?
Have you got that, Chris or Carolyn?
2.3 reallocate 2.3 million of the state and trust funds with a management flexibility to the Chancellor from DEI to be reallocated to public safety,
Yes, sir.
and to carve out the athletic budget, but to keep in the $125 million currently budgeted for athletics as a placeholder to keep the budget at whole to as is.
Mr. Chairman, could we also add to that motion that an audit be done of the athletic department?
We can take that up as a second motion of the full board.
Second.
I have a second to my motion. Do I have any discussion? Hearing no additional.
Wait,
Yeah.
yes.
Hi, everyone. In case you haven't met me yet, my name is Shalia Taylor, and I am serving as student body president at UNC. I just had a few questions for the board before we do make the motion. Obviously, the Board of Governors is awaiting to approve the decision regarding DEI policies. And it's before you all mentioned that the UNC system office will also be able to provide us with additional insights and guidance if the new policy is passed. And considering that the implementation lies within the Chancellor's discretion, would it not be advisable for us to wait further guidance before considering any adjustments to the budget?
Any discussion addition to that?
Yeah, I have some, if y'all can hear me, I was on mute a minute ago, but can you hear me now?
Now here, we didn't have you here at first, sorry.
Well, I apologize. I was not aware of the meeting. Sorry. My Outlook is not working on my computer at the office and my cell phone. I was away this weekend and did not know about the meeting until just now. So John had let me know there might be a meeting this morning, so I was on the lookout for it. But anyway, to address the athletic, well, that's not before us right now. The motion that John had just made, I think, or the request that he made. So I'll abstain from now from talking about it. But I guess y'all, some of you guys have spent a lot of time on this budget, and I'm on the committee, but have not participated in any of the meetings. If there have been, I don't think I've not been a part of any meetings. So this is the first opportunity this morning for me to have heard and seen the budget. So I would just like a little more time to be able to review it before I vote on anything.
Well, to your point, there haven't been any meetings since the last board meeting. What there have been is just individual discussions with Vice Chancellor Knuffman and with the Chancellor, just on our own individual basis. That's been.
And I guess what I'm saying is, it seems like the meetings that are taking place, the discussions that are taking place, being on the committee, I just would like more time to know what's going on overall, especially when it comes to some of these important issues.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just to note a point, Mr. Chair, I did have a discussion with Dean Weber, and he confirmed that a audit would take up to 2 months.
Okay, great. So let's just be clear in the organization. We are currently in the committee, which is myself, Trustee Cotis, Trustee Blaine, Trustee Briner, Trustee Jones, Trustee Meekins, Trustee Patel, Trustee Turner, Trustee White, and Trustee Pryor. Once this motion is passed or fails, and then another motion is passed, it goes to the full board immediately after this. So that is where we are in the procedural process as it stands right now. So I have made the motion. I have a second from Trustee Cotis. Is there any additional discussion from members of the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. So thank you, Mr. McClure, for taking apt notes on that. That concludes the business of the committee. And then we will, because I think the audit would be better served on the full board. Right? Okay.
We'll have to.
And we'll move.
Adjourn.
I move to adjourn the committee of Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, great. The committee is now adjourned, and I will turn it over to Chairman Pryor. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Bullock. Board of Trustees member. Hold on. Okay, good morning. Welcome to this special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina. As board chair, I must remind all members of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest. If you know of any conflict or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter coming before the board today, please identify it at this time. Hearing none, I'll ask Chris McClure to please call the roll.
Mr. Valentine.
Here.
Blaine.
Here.
Mr. Bullock.
Here.
Here. Mr. Bryan. Ms. Evans.
Here.
Dr. Jones.
Here.
Is that Mr. Kalapa? Mr. Cotis?
Here.
Mr. Meekins?
Here.
Mr. Patel?
Here.
Chair Pryor?
Here.
Ms. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Turner? And Mrs. White?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. The agenda for this special meeting was provided to board members via OnBoard. Links to a copy of the agenda for this special meeting were also posted electronically on the board's website in the university's open meetings calendar. I'd ask every board member to refer to that agenda now. Our only item of business is a report from the Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee today. I'll ask Chair Bullock to provide that report.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As we know, we just met in a special session of the Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee, and we present to the entire board the following motion, and I'll call on Mr. McClure to read that motion so that we get it accurately reported. Mr. McClure.
Motion was to approve the all funds budget with an amendment that $2.3 million be reallocated from the state and trust funds with a management flexibility to the Chancellor, carved out from DEI funds to redirected to public safety, and to carve out the athletic budget, but to leave $125 million in the overall budget as a placeholder to send it to the Board of Governors.
That is the motion that we present to the whole board by way of unanimous vote from the committee. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before we approve that, I'd like to make a motion to add a audit by Dean Weber of the athletic department, so that is concurrent with what we're doing here today. Can I get a second to add an audit? Thank you, Trustee Cotis. So we now are going to have a vote on both motions to approve.
So can we do the budget and then the second, or you want to?
Sure, let's do that.
So we need a second to the budget first.
Second.
We have a
Trustee
second.
Cotis. Any discussion or debate?
I have
All
a
in,
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
What's the rationale for the 125 that we carve out of the athletic budget or that we leave in?
We're signaling that we are not trying to ask for more money for athletics, but we are keeping that $125 million number, so it not cause confusion with the Board of Governors that we're asking for more money.
Yeah, no, I got that. But why 125? Sorry, I don't.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Go ahead.
Trustee White, the 125 is the current top line of the athletics department, which is consistent with past years and a normal growth rate for our athletics department. About 115 million of that 125 is privately funded or revenue generated. So I just want to make sure the board does not believe we're asking the state of North Carolina for 125 million. I think the motion is that we are not going to ask any more than that top line, and the state's portion is a very, very small fraction of that.
Got it. I got you. Thank you. I just didn't know where that number was coming from. Thank you.
And to follow up on Trustee Evans' point, Trustee White, I think the issue is there's significant frustration that we have not been able to get the information that we need from the athletics department. And therefore, the next motion, if it passes, will use our audit authority in the committee that was set up by Chair Bullock because we have the right then to request whatever information we need and do a deep dive into athletics.
Got it. I understand the strategy. I was just curious about the number. Thank you both.
Okay, we have a second on the motion to approve the all funds budget with the two amendments. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please
Now,
say
this
aye.
does not include the request for an audit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's coming in a second motion. All those opposed? Motion carries. So our second motion here that Trustee Cotis, you seconded?
Yes.
Okay, is to include the audit of the athletics department. Any discussion or debate?
I just one clarification, and that would be headed by Trustee Patel,
The audit
Chairman
committee.
Patel's
Yes.
committee, audit committee.
Yeah, I've got some questions.
And the idea behind that would be that we're reviewing the numbers, looking at overall operational efficiency to make sure that there's not a significant shortfall and that we've got
I mean,
Trustee Evans.
the budget
better able to speak to
the
it.
first budget, and Nate did a great job making the budget better in the last 2 weeks, but the first budget that we saw was a $17 million deficit and $100 million cumulative deficit in the coming years with no plan to address that, to mitigate that. So if I don't want anyone to think we're talking in code, there are real issues here, a real concern that one of our most valuable assets and something that really generates revenue is not being managed properly. So that is the need for the question and answer, and that is the need for the audit.
Yeah, let me ask you a few questions. As part of the actual audit itself, how often does the athletic department have an audit from outside services? Does anybody know?
This is a Dean Weber audit.
Yeah, it's an internal.
So I know that. I know that. My question is, but it's how often is an audit? Is my question. Do we even know as far as from a financial standpoint, from
I guess
outside?
Never.
It's
unless
an
they're
UNC
auditors.
affiliate. It's a UNC affiliate. It must have to have some audit.
It absolutely does.
Well, it's
And
not
I-
an affiliate. It's a.
Well,
it's
the
a
athletic
government
department
I think
of
to
university.
clarify this, the audit, Ralph, is whatever we direct or whatever the audit committee and the board approves to review.
Oh, I understand the audit you're wanting to put on the athletic department. I'm asking you if we know how many times or how often it is audited from an outside source.
So the answer to that is usually there's a lot of different individual audits or components of it.
Correct.
In addition, the overall.
That's right. I think there was an audit of the ticket office, or I remember within
Right.
the past 5 years, but Ralph, I don't think there's been an audit of the athletic department since we've been on the board, to answer your question.
So it's a good, Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Go ahead.
Because I do know about this. And that is, so Ralph, that's a good question. But so you have to bifurcate, for example, the Rams Club, which is an affiliated entity, which has an audit requirement because they are, number one, a nonprofit incorporated by the state of North Carolina, which would require an independent audit if the nonprofit receives in excess of a certain amount of money per year. So the Rams Club's going to have its own independent audit annually. Okay. The athletic department is a department of the university. It's a state agency. So there is no independent required audit of that department. The state auditor could audit it if the state auditor wanted to. The state auditor could audit the entire university if the state auditor wanted to. But otherwise, it would be incumbent upon the internal audit function of the university, which is headed, as you know, by Dean Weber, to effectuate an audit of a department or part of a department. I recall, as Chair Pryor recalls, I think it was about 3.5 years ago, there was an audit of the athletic department's ticket allocation model and how they accounted for tickets. And that audit was completed by Dean Weber, and their procedures changed as a result of that audit, as I recall. And it's probably in your materials if you look way back, because you were on the board then too. But that's the only audit I'm aware of since I've been on the board of the athletic department.
And I guess I also want to address Mr. Codis's comments about the efforts to communicate with the athletic department. What does he mean by that? What efforts have we made, and what is he talking about?
I'm simply relaying what Trustee Evans has expressed.
And what is that?
Ralph, I mean, do you remember the November meeting? We were in closed session, so let's be thoughtful about how we characterize it. But we were in closed session in November, and we were having a heated exchange, and we were told that there would be that the athletic director's team was working with Vice Chancellor Knaufman to provide projections, and that we would have those. And the implication was we'd have them at the next meeting, and they weren't ready by January. And so then between January and March, I started asking for projections, and I was following appropriate lines of command and asking the budget chair and the chairman of the board if I could please see the budget. And I must have asked 2 or 3 dozen times. And I don't really think we ever got that until about 3 weeks ago. And I wasn't present at that meeting, but there were members of this board present at a meeting where the deficit in athletics for next year was 17 million. And the projected cumulative deficit going forward was over 100 million. And there was going to be a time to talk about it. So then we had our March meeting, and the athletics director wasn't present. Granted, we were playing basketball.
He was present. He was present the day before. He could have met with us and talked to us about it.
At closed session when we were going to discuss it as a full board on Thursday.
Well, yeah, and he was in meetings.
The athletic director wasn't present.
He was in meetings about.
Sorry, Trustee Meekins, I'm answering the question. And now here we are, and it's May, and we're supposed to have closed session opportunity to discuss this on Wednesday and or Thursday. And that is the issue. We'd like the opportunity to discuss what I asked for 6 months ago, which is relevant and important. That's it, an opportunity.
Hey, Trustee Meekins.
Yes.
I don't want to cut you off. We've got a couple of people here that were good through 10 o'clock that are on the call. Anything else you'd like to voice? Because I'd like to go ahead and move this on.
think there'll be
Yeah, he was in, our athletic director was in NCAA committee meetings on Thursday of the meeting and could not be there, but I do not like the inferences or the comments that he was not available or it wasn't, he was here and would have been available if he wasn't in NCAA meetings at the time on that Thursday meeting. And I've been meeting, we just had a meeting last week with the Rams Club and our athletic director gave us a 1 hour presentation about where we are in our budget. And most of those shortfalls, as we all know, came from the pandemic. Vice Chair Bolick, or excuse me, former Chair Bolick, you were on the committees during the pandemic and all that we dealt with. And many of this, excuse me?
Ralph, I attended that meeting too.
Can I finish? I'm going to finish and I'll shut up.
Well, go ahead. We got to go ahead and have this vote and get out of here.
I'm almost done. If you just let me finish. Mr. Bolick and I were on the committee when we were dealing with the pandemic issues. And while other schools were dropping their programs and ending their programs, the athletic director and John Montgomery and our chancellor were dealing with the budget, and we projected deficits in the future and until we could determine what we needed to be, what needed to be done. So my point is, I don't appreciate the comments and the inferences that the athletic director has not been forthcoming and available at any point in time. We want to sit down and meet with him, except the one day that he was in NCAA meetings because he's about to become the head of the selection committee for next year, and he was vice chair of that committee this year.
Okay,
thank you, and the turnover was ongoing at the time.
Motion on the table to approve the audit for the athletics department. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Duly noted. Trustee Meekins. The motion carries. If there are no further items for the board's.
One small clarification item. The number is 134.97 in the athletic budget. And so I just want to make sure everyone's, that's going to reflect that,
Thank you.
not 125.
Thank you.
So
134.
is that a
Do we want
clarification?
That's reflective of what we saw in March from the all funds.
I think that
A
matches.
motion to amend.
We can clarify.
Okay.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Going crazy.
That man.
I'm like-
Treasurer. If there are no further items for the board's consideration, we will adjourn without objection.
Thank you.
So moved.